Hey guys, Lord of the Deep here. I thought I'd make a video showing my progress with game dev over the past year. A little bit over a year ago, I decided to take the plunge and actually learn game dev. I've been a long time gamer. I guess you could consider me sort of from the golden age of PC gaming. So I grew up playing games like Doom and Duke Nukem 3D, Wolfenstein, those sort of games. So I was always interested in game dev. I just never got around to it. Life gets in the way sometimes. But last year I decided to actually, make a concerted effort to actually, learn it. So I thought today I'd sort of walk through my progress over the past year or so. I'll show you some of the projects I did when I was learning, when I first started out learning, essentially, up to some examples of what I'm working on now. And maybe it'll help you guys sort of get a gauge of how much progress you might be able to make over the course of a year. And again, I wasn't doing this full time, so I have a family, I work, this is like averaging about an hour or two a day. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but for the most part, consider it about an hour or two a day. After I go through some of my progress, then I've compiled like a list of, maybe 8 or so tips or tricks that might be helpful for you guys. They were helpful for me at least. And they helped me, I think, make progress over the past year. So maybe they'll help you guys as well. Why don't we get right into it? So I decided to learn game dev in Unity. At the time when I first started out, to be honest, I didn't even know what, the popular engines were. So once I started reading, it seemed like at the time, Unity, you had Unreal, Godot or Godot or whatever the heck you want to call it. There was also Game Maker. I think Game Maker Toolkit is one of them. So I was sort of bouncing around looking at different information about those, and I ended up landing on Unity just because it seemed like there was a lot of resources available online. They have a really good library on the Unity website for, with tutorials and descriptions of all the various classes and functions. Plus, there's a lot of people online, from the YouTube community who use Unity and publish a lot of tutorials. So it seemed like a decent place to get started. I also wanted to make 2D games to start, so it seems like a lot of the folks who make 2D games tend to go into Unity, where some of the high-end, more 3D games go into more Unreal, I guess, because of the capabilities of the engine in that area. When I got started, I was actually, and this will tie into one of my tips at the end, but I was obviously lost. I don't have any real coding experience. I do work in an IT job, my full-time job, not in a coding capacity. So I understand, coding and logic to a certain extent, but not the nuts and bolts, right? I've never actually developed or coded on any projects. So, I had no experience in that. Again, I didn't even know anything about game engines. So this is literally, diving into it head first without practically any experience. So when I started out, I was hunting and pecking for a lot of material. I started going on YouTube to look at tutorials, and I was completely lost, to be honest. So what I ended up doing is, deciding to go the route of a course. I actually got a course, I think it's Game Dev TV. Yeah, so here's their website. When I was looking, it seemed like they had, they started out, they had very baseline courses for learning Unity. It seemed very comprehensive, and you could scale with their courses. So, you could start out at the basics and move your way up. So, and the price was pretty decent, and they get really good ratings. So I ended up going with a course through them. So this is their, I think this was their basic or intro Unity course. Yeah, it's this one here, Complete C# Unity Game Developer 2D Online Course. So this is what I started learning on. And they start you out at the very basics. So this first game that we made here was literally just a number guessing game, I guess, with some very basic UI. So you could see here, good old Arnold here, where you could just go higher, it bumps the number higher. You could affirm it, you could play again. Okay, do a pick a number between 1 and 1,000. Good old Predator reference there with Arnie. And you see it slowly narrows it down. I don't know. It's a basic number guessing game. But, this is the level, that they start you at, essentially, in terms of learning the engine and learning C# code. So I think it's good because if you're just starting out, it lays out a good foundation for you, right? And you can see there aren't even a lot of objects in here. It's very, very basic, very straightforward. And as you go through the course, so for example, this is one. Let me pull up Unity again. So you slowly build on what you learned. So, maybe I think about maybe a month later, or not even a month, maybe a couple weeks later, we moved on and we built this in the course, which is like a block breaker type game. So you could see, actually this is, I think it's sort of controlling itself because he was, I think the instructor at the end of the course was showing us how to actually automate testing. So it sort of, tests itself, and then you could monitor for errors in your console. But, here's an example. This was like a couple weeks later. We went into this, which was a little bit more advanced. It uses, the physics with the ball and everything. Another few weeks later, we started getting into more advanced stuff. So here's this laser defender. And you can see we're getting a little bit more advanced now. There's some more objects here. Here, I'll play it again. You can see there's actually audio in this game. Some particle effects, which Unity actually has a really good engine for designing your own particle effects. It's pretty deep, at least from what I can tell. You can see. And then fast forward a few more weeks. So each one of these games, they took me about, a week or two. Again, an hour or two a day, just going through the course, following along and making the game. And eventually, we got to this game, which is where I stopped in the course. I think there was only one more game after this, and it was a 2D platformer, but I didn't have any intentions of making a platformer type game, so I decided to stop here. And this is it's called Glitch Garden. It's sort of like a Plants versus Zombies or whatever that game is. Sort of a tower defense type game. And this game was actually really cool. This is where things started to get really fairly complex in terms of the design of the game. So you can, put your units here. It's a tower defense type game. It was pretty neat, actually. So what I decided to do at this point, I felt like I had a decent base, a starting base of knowledge. So this was around, I want to say, maybe September of last year, and I decided to try and make my own game. And I used this game actually as a base for my game. So it's going to be a similar tower defense type game, but I had a concept in mind, which I'll show you guys in a little bit. And I wanted to tweak some of the game mechanics in this game and make it a little bit more unique. So I also wanted to work on my own artwork for the game, so I decided to take that on, in addition to doing sound design and music as well. So I I play guitar and write music. I've been writing music for years, so that was also going to be something cool that I wanted to do as part of my game. So I sort of had this vision for the game, and I was like, well, I might as well just start now, right? That's one thing, you could keep learning and learning and learning, and learning's good, but until you actually get into it and start to work on a game and, work on your own use cases within your game, that's when your learning and your skill will actually start to build, because you really have to think your way through these things, and you have to do research. And at least in my opinion, that's I learned a lot going through the course, but I felt like I really started to move up in knowledge and skill level once I actually started to try and develop my own games. So I use this as the base for my game, and I could bring up one of my early Unity projects, and this was probably around, like I said, September or October of last year. So the concept for the game, again, it was going to be a simple tower defense. I was going to rip off the concept essentially of what you just saw built with the tower defense, but I was going to use this concept of Skinwalker Ranch. So for those of you who are into all that kind of stuff, weird paranormal stuff, Skinwalker Ranch is this ranch out in the Uinta Basin in Utah that has all kinds of weird paranormal shit that happens around there, and it's pretty neat. I love that stuff. I don't know that I believe it, all of it, but it's fun stuff. So I actually read the book Hunt for the Skinwalker. If you're into that kind of stuff, it's neat. And I decided to use that as my concept for my game. So you're the rancher. You have to protect your ranch. You hire your little ranch hands or helpers to actually protect your cattle from these various paranormal threats, skinwalkers and blue orbs, weird orbs, UFOs, aliens, all that kind of stuff. So you can see this is actually this is like a very early version of it. It looks like I had already spent time working on artwork, which is a whole other topic in and of itself, and I'm not an artist, so I had to take the time to learn Photoshop and do some other stuff as well in terms of the artwork. But you can see this is the base version, right? So I sort of stole that tile base from the Glitch Garden Dev TV game course. Max. Sorry, dog was dreaming. Yeah, so I used that as my base, and I just started replacing the units with my own units and their own animations. So you can see here, it's a wild mess here. But you can see I have like the base, I have the collider set up, right? So when the enemies encounter the cattle or the defenders, they actually initiate an attack animation. And I think I have, so I was starting to learn how to spawn stuff on the screen and lock it to a grid here. Let's see, there's a game timer up here. So it's a mess, but it was a starting point, right? It was my starting point back. Like I said, I think this is around October or so. Okay. So this is actually once I learned how to actually develop out some more background art, so you could see, and there's this weird tint on the screen, which I think is, I started to learn how to apply master VFX. There's lighting in here, so I learned how to actually implement Unity's 2D lighting system, which is really, really cool. I think it's a package, if I recall. If you install the package, from there it's pretty straightforward, provided all of your, I think your textures have to be set accordingly so they respond to the lighting. So if you come into, so they have a material on them, sprite, lit default. So as long as you're setting the material correctly, you have the package installed, then all your materials will respond accordingly to the 2D lights. So this is where things really started to I started to get really motivated, because it started to look like a real game, right? I learned how to implement, like I said, my background, the lighting, some of the effects. Here, let me actually just play. I don't know if there's sound in this version. No sound yet. So you could see I even have a UI here. There's some cool particle effects. I have a currency system here that allows you to purchase the defenders. That looks awful, that timer. I think I get rid of that. I got rid of that eventually. Oh, and I was also learning how to use the camera. So you could zoom, you could sort of move around, which in the current iteration of this game I've actually taken out because there's really you don't need a camera for this type of game. You don't need camera movement. So you can see there's like fog and these little, they look like little bugs flying around. All of that's from Unity's particle system, which is pretty neat. But this is where, it started to look like a real game. It was pretty motivating at this point. I then got to a point where, I wanted to implement sound effects and music and stuff. I ended up going with Fmod, but it didn't start out that way. So actually, let me show you what the current iteration of the game looks like, its current state. So again, I started this in October of last year, roughly October. So we're almost a year in. So let me close this out and I'll show you where I'm at now with the game. Again, this is the most recent iteration of the game. I wanted to actually develop a vertical slice of the game, if you will. So it would have a complete experience, starting out at least, where you would have a menu screen, you would flow through, maybe to the first level or the first map or whatever. So that's the way I sort of developed my first version of the game, a testable, playable version of the game. So what you're seeing now is that version essentially. So it has a menu screen, it flows through, there's even a cutscene, it goes into the game itself. So let me play, and there's audio, music, everything. So let me watch the volume here. So actually let me do it full screen. So again, here's the menu screen, there's animations, that's all done in Unity. Clouds, all that's particle systems in Unity. The music, sound effects are all implemented in Fmod, which I'll talk a little bit about that later. So, do a new game. Here's a little cutscene I made. This is using Unity's video player. And then we get into I think there may even be an in-game cutscene here as well. I gotta level my audio between scenes. Sort of introducing you to what's about to happen. And then we get into the actual gameplay here. So you can see I now have a grid system implemented. I also have special abilities that I implemented for the units. So you can have like a one-shot, one-kill, you could heal units. So I'll try and survive this. And the units are actually getting stronger, so I increase, when you hear that sound, actually increase the health and the attack damage of the enemies. So we made it through the first encounter. Again, it's not easy to actually talk and play at the same time. So. so I have a screen shake effect, which is cool. That's using the camera. So things are getting a little dicey here. Spawners are increasing. Or decreasing their time between spawns, rather. Made it through, so I have like a little end of match screen where it tracks all the enemies you killed, the money you saved. I don't know. I haven't figured out the actual economy in the game, or the sort of set up the macro game itself, the macro strategy in the game, because I've been just focused on the core gameplay. But there you have it. It's a for the first version, it's an actual functioning game. Like I said, with the menu screen, I could restart the game, I could quit and go back to the menus. So, that's where I am today. I'm starting to work on like expanding the game out with like a hub map where there's different areas on the ranch that you'll protect your cattle from the paranormal threat. So that's what I'm actually working on now. But this is about a year's worth of progress. Back to the original intent of the video. This is about, like I said, 1 year's progress, starting from scratch, essentially. I said earlier that I'd go over some tips and tricks, so that's what we'll do now. For me, and again, this may not be suitable for everyone, but for me, I found a lot of value in actually starting with a game dev course, as opposed to hunting and pecking for information on YouTube and through devlogs and stuff like that. So I feel like the course actually gave me a very good foundation to start from, right? Even though it was fairly boring at first, doing, text adventures and number guessing games and stuff like that. But I have to say it did give me a base understanding of everything in the engine, and as well as the code aspect of it as well. So, and there's also a community forum. If you sign up for a course like that, Game Dev TV, they have a community on there, and their instructors will respond to you if you have questions as you're going through. So that's also really, really handy. Because you paid for the course, obviously you expect that you'll get they'll at least answer your questions and respond. So that's also another benefit of going that route. So again, not for everybody, but it worked for me. Another thing I would say is to develop a little bit every single day. You've probably heard this before, even in other areas of your life when you're learning a new skill or something. It's good to practice it every day, and the same is true with game dev. I found that, doing a little bit each day, it kept me motivated, it kept me focused. From a practical perspective, if I'd say only did this on weekends or something, right, when I was building my game, I would have to reorient myself every weekend to understand where I left off. In that same vein, what I like to do is I like to have like a task tracker. So this is my backlog, and you can see it's pretty long. It goes all the way back from when I started, and this is just a basic Google sheet. You could use any spreadsheet application, but this is just a basic Google sheet tracking all of my dev tasks, when I started, when I completed the task, so I could get an idea of how long certain tasks were taking me. And then I tied it to a release, so you could see all of these items here going down. I had pegged for what I call my MVP, which is my first official release. There was obviously a lot, and it took me all the way till roughly May. So from October to May to really get a workable version of the game. So, but this is good for staying organized, staying focused. Again, you don't have to get crazy with it. Basic tasks that you want to get done as you go through your game. And it's also a motivator. Some days when I just wasn't feeling motivated, I would pull up my tracker and I would actually force myself, as crazy as this sounds, I would force myself to scroll down to where I left off, because in a way it shows you all the progress you've made, as long as you're staying up to date and tracking this. So, it could be a motivator as well. You could look back and see all the work that you've completed. Looking through some of these items, I remember some of the issues I had, some of the challenges I had, and that I had overcome in order to develop the feature I was working on. So it's a good reminder of the progress you've made. So just something that may help you as you go forward. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's another stumbling block I had, in particular when I was implementing the audio and the sound for the game. I started using Unity's built-in tools for audio design. I ended up developing certain tools or features to meet the use cases in the game, in terms of like not repeating sounds too often, so we didn't have a lot of overlapping sounds. There were a number of things I wanted to do, and like having some form of adaptive music as well. I ended up developing tools to do that I think I spent probably maybe 3 or 4 weeks just working on that. And it got to the point where it was just, I wasn't able, at least at my skill level at the time, I wasn't able to develop all the features I wanted. And then I found out that there are already applications out there, or tools, packages, from third-party developers that essentially fulfill all those use cases that I wanted to do. So I ended up using Fmod, which is like an adaptive music system. It's really, really cool. If you have any experience with writing music and using digital audio workstations, then this will be pretty straightforward to you, but it allows you to essentially import all your sounds. You could attach them to a grid or a timeline and then trigger them programmatically from within your game. And then they have all these built-in features, like I said, that I was developing myself, in terms of, like, for example, how many max instances do you want to play at a given time? Do you want a cooldown between your instances? So a lot of these things, somebody's already developed it. Chances are, if there's something you're looking to design or build in your game, a particular set of features or a tool set, chances are somebody's already developed it. So it may make sense to actually go out there and look for that when you're developing your game. You don't have to be perfect. That's another tip or pointer. I'm not really good. To be honest, my code's a mess. If you were to look at my code, it's complete spaghetti, to be completely honest. Let me see if I could show you an example of it that will just blow your mind if you look at it. It's not clean code. And I'm not proud of it, but it's, at the same time, it does what it needs to do in the context of the game. So you could see, like, it's a mess. There's stuff all over the place in this code. There's a lot of repetition in some of these functions, and there's just a lot of junk, to be honest, and it could be designed better. And I know I'm not the perfect coder, but at the same time, I didn't let it stop me from making the game, right? I learned what I needed to learn in terms of coding just to fulfill the particular vision I had for the game and the specific use cases. And obviously, you'll get better as you progress, right? And you'll learn how to clean things up. And I intend on doing that as well. But, you don't have to be perfect as you're going through this. Focus on what your strengths are. I like sound design and music, so I made sure I put a pretty good amount of time into that to make it come out really good. So, but again, these are things you'll improve with over time. And if you do have an obvious deficit in something, use pre-made assets. So you could go on, Unity has a store. They sell pre-made assets like particle effects. That's a good example. I tried making my own particle effects, and I realized I'm going to spend so much time trying to figure this out and still be mediocre at it that I was like, I'm just going to buy particle effects. And that's what I did. The effects you saw in the game, like blood splashes and, all those kind of flashy type effects, those were all muzzle flashes and things like that. Those are all from a particle effects pack I bought off of Unity. Don't be afraid to use, pre-made assets, because if it gets the job done, it gets the job done, and it lets you focus on your strengths and things that'll make your game unique. Don't overstudy. Don't spend too much time studying. I like to actually learn stuff in and out, so this is a pitfall of mine. When I first started, I spent a lot of time reading and researching and watching videos and really getting down into the minutia. And that's good, but in some cases it could also hold you back. Really, like I said at the beginning of the video, where you're really going to improve your skills the most is through actually developing your game and hitting those challenges or those stumbling blocks where you're trying to figure something out, and then actually, like I said, going and seeking out specific knowledge or information at that time to help solve your use case. So I found that more effective than trying to just study and learn everything and focus too much on that. Have a use case or a goal in mind for a particular feature for your game. Try and develop it. If you get stuck, then do your research or studying in that particular area and then move on. A little bit of a practical tip here. Save your game often and create backups. Early on, I lost a chunk of my game when I first started making it. I had a failure on my hard drive, and now I'm like paranoid. I actually have an external hard drive over here, which backs up my game. I have another drive over there, and I have an online backup service that backs up my hard drive all the time. So I have multiple redundancies because I can't imagine losing the progress I've made to this point due to some catastrophic failure on my hard drive. So it may seem pretty straightforward, but there's such a high cost associated to it, even though the likelihood is low of you losing everything. But there's such a high cost associated with it if you do lose everything that you want to make sure you care for it. So always create backups, do redundancies. I create multiple versions of my game. So for example, you could see here, I have versions earlier than this, but they're backed up on another drive. But you could see once I start a particular feature or something, I'll actually copy and paste the whole Unity project folder and I'll start working from there, right? So I always have a version before it that I know is stable and worked. If something happens and I, for example, totally jack something up in code and I just want to go back to where I was prior, I could just import this prior project and start working from there. So it's little things like this that I've learned along the way that really helps. So make sure you take breaks. So I know I said before, you want to work on your game every day, but I would also say make sure you put time in there to take breaks. So for example, what I like to do is I like to have a goal in terms of like a certain release or an iteration. So once I release the first working version of my game, and by release I mean soft release, right? I let my friends play it, my wife, my daughter, I let people play it, right? That was my first goal. And then once I was done, I actually took a week off, I think, at that point. So I took a break. I stepped away, I sort of got refreshed. And when I came back, I was like totally ready to go. I was motivated. I couldn't wait to work on my game. And it sort of refreshed me, right, to just step away. So make sure you put time, set your goals. And then once you hit the goal, maybe take a little break, walk away for a little bit, do something else. In my case, I don't get a lot of time to play games now, even though I love playing video games. So for me, when I took that week off, I think I played Prey, the 2017 release. It's been on my backlog to play for years. I never got around to it. I actually played and bet the game in that week. So that was like my little reward for all the hard work I put in. And like I said, I felt refreshed when I came back and motivated. So set some time to take some breaks, and it'll be good for your overall mental health and your motivation as you proceed through your game. So I think that's it, guys. If you like this, give me a like. If you want to subscribe, I'll probably do some more videos on here, especially if the response is positive to this. Maybe some more devlog type videos, or where I'll do gameplay videos, walkthrough as I'm progressing through the game. But if you guys like it, like I said, give me a like, subscribe. And then also, I'd like to get to know people in the community, so put some comments down below on how you're making, what progress you're making. If you're a first-time developer, game developer, put some comments. about how you're progressing, what challenges you're facing. I'm interested to, like I said, know how other people are progressing through their game dev journey. So that's it for now, guys. Thanks.